All right. Thank you, brother. We're going to be there in 1 Samuel chapter 30 this morning, and we're going to talk about this account in which David and his men experience a victory after a tremendous defeat. And we're going to talk about the roles that different men played at that time and what the value of those roles were. But before we begin, you may have seen a photo that looks similar to this, a team photograph. And I actually had a glossy photo version of something like this. It might have been this exact same thing. I scoured the internet looking for it. I had it as a child, so I did not take care of it, and it is no longer in my possession. It's something I wish I had today. But it's a photo of the 1995 World Series champions, the Atlanta Braves. And some of you may remember that year as I do. It holds a special place in my memory. But you have here a photograph and all the names listed below of the team of the Atlanta Braves in 1995. You may recognize some of those names. My favorite pitcher of all time is in this photo, Greg Maddux. So, but I bring this up because was it just these men who brought victory in 1995? There are many who were a part of this team, that were a part of the roster, that are not pictured in this photo. You have equipment managers. Equipment is important, isn't it? What if you send those boys out on the field without gloves or a bat? You've got to have equipment managers. You have to have trainers. You think these men got where they are without trainers, without coaches? In fact, football season is upon us. You may notice that during the game, there are athletes that will get a cramp or something in their leg, and they'll fall to the ground. And who goes out there? You'll see a trainer go out there and massage the knee and get them ready to return to the field. You see them on camera. Do you ever know their names? Not usually. In fact, there's some you never see on camera. They're wrapping someone's knee up, that they've got a banged up knee or something like that, and they're just getting them ready on Saturday morning. You'll never see them on camera. You'll never see them in the team photograph. You'll never see them and their name engraved on the trophy when they bring it home at the end. You'll see all these men's names, but you'll see many more names missing that had something to do with that victory than the athletes on that trophy. And that's what I want to talk about this morning, because the account that we see in 1 Samuel chapter 30, the men, there are about 200 men who would not have been engraved on the trophy, would not have been in the team photograph in 1 Samuel chapter 30. David's men, there after suffering a tremendous defeat, they had lost their home city of Ziklag, depicted here at the top of the map. These raiders, the Amalekites, had burned the city to the ground, had taken their wives and their children prisoner. And so David and his men, 600 of them, set out in pursuit, began their march. But then when they reached the Brook Besor, 200 of them were too faint to continue. They were tired. They were exhausted from all of these events. And so we find that they stayed there at the Brook Besor, and it says that they kept the stuff. Some of your versions, your translations might say keepers of the stuff. So some of them stayed behind and kept the stuff, 200 of them, and then 400 of them continued further, pressed forward, and overtook those Amalekite raiders at their own camp further south. And so then the question comes, who gets the credit? The 400 fighting men, the 400 men who are visible, who marched forward, who gets the credit for it? And that's I've got a change up for you, or a curveball coming for you in regards to answering that question, who gets the credit? Because what's our natural instinct? The ones that actually did the, waving the sword around and fighting. That's our first instinct. And so we tend to value the ones that fought and not the ones that stay behind and watch the stuff at the Brook Besor. And so we're going to be talking about that this morning, talking about the ruling that David had in regards to those men, those 200 and the 400 men there. And so I want to look at this again and notice that every victory asks that question: who gets the credit and who's counted out on the credit? Who receives the reward and who is counted out from that reward? And so the proposal I have this morning is that the Lord assigns worth to one's faithfulness to their post and not whether or not that post is visible to all others. Does that make sense? The Lord assigns worth by faithfulness to one's post. So every Christian, we're going to bring an application to this and show that every one of us has a post, and we must be faithful in filling it. And we have visible posts, and we have posts that are not so visible to others. First, we'll see that the battle has two fronts. In the case of David here, let's read verses 9 through 21 of chapter 30. And put some context to this. So David went, he and the 600 men that were with him, and came to the Brook Besor, where those that were left behind stayed. But David pursued, he and 400 men, for 200 abode behind, which were so faint that they could not go over the Brook Besor. And they found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David and gave him bread, and he did eat, and they made him drink water. And they gave him a piece of a cake of figs and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten, his spirit came again to him, for he had eaten no bread, nor drunk any water, 3 days and 3 nights. And David said unto him, To whom belongest thou? And whence art thou? And he said, I am a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite. And my master left me, because 3 days agone I fell sick. He made an invasion upon the south of the Cherethites, and upon the coast which belongeth to Judah, and upon the south of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire. And David said to him, Canst thou bring me down to this company? And he said, Swear unto me by God, and thou wilt neither kill me, nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will bring thee down to this company. And when they had brought him down, behold, they were spread abroad upon all the earth, eating and drinking and dancing, because of the great spoil that they had taken out of the land of the Philistines and out of the land of Judah. And David smote them from the twilight even unto the evening of the next day, and there escaped not a man of them, save 400 young men which rode upon camels and fled. And David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away, and David rescued his 2 wives. And there was nothing lacking to them, neither small nor great, neither sons nor daughters, neither spoil nor anything that they had taken to them. David recovered all. And David took all the flocks and the herds which they drave before those other cattle, and said, This is David's spoil. And David came to the 200 men, which were so faint that they could not follow David, whom they had made also to abide at the Brook Besor. And they went forth to meet David and to meet the people that were with him. And when David came near to the people, he saluted them. So here we have 2 fronts. You have one, first of all, David set out with 600 men in pursuit of these Amalekites, and who had burned Ziklag, had taken women and children with them. And at the brook of Besor, 200 of them were so faint that they could not go over, he says. Now, that's not fear that kept them at the Brook Besor. It wasn't cowardice, and it wasn't rebellion. It was exhaustion. They were too exhausted to physically continue. After having suffered a defeat at Ziklag, after having marched who knows how many miles, they were exhausted. And David did not rebuke them for being tired. He simply, and he didn't leave them defenseless either. He gave them a job. He left them to guard the stuff. So the baggage, the supplies, maybe the weaponry that they were not using at the time, and they were, importantly, guarding the unit's retreat. If something went bad, they'd need a line of retreat, and those men stood to guard that as well. So you have two fronts. You have those that we are quick to praise, the fighters, those that are doing something visible, something measurable in verses 9 through 10. And then you have support, the keepers of the stuff. So you have two fronts, but they aren't two armies. They aren't two different groups of people. They are one army together. When I think about, or you may think about, a surgical team. If you've ever gone under surgery, there are some men or some people that are very visible to you and you're appreciative of them. The head surgeon himself, or herself, I guess, very visible, doing the actual work where it needs to be done. Then you have, who I am very appreciative of, the anesthesiologist, because I'm told by my dentist I have the redhead gene, which means it takes a little bit more to dull the pain for me. So the anesthesiologist might not be as visible as the surgeon, but I appreciate that anesthesiologist. There are others that I might not see. I'm very thankful that the equipment being used is sterile. You know, it takes somebody a tech to provide the utensils needed in surgery, to lay it out, organize it, get it sterile. Did you know also there's someone you definitely don't see? The person buying the medical supplies, keeping the hospital supplied, and so that the tech has something to lay out there on the tray for the surgeon. A lot of people go into your surgery being successful, but we don't see all of them, do we? They're all equally as important. And so the application today to the church is we all have a role to fill, don't we? We all have posts to stand at, and they're not always visible. The preacher, probably the most visible of them all. Not only that, you have those that are very good and continue in the work of holding personal Bible studies, and you see results from that. You have visible, measurable things that you can look at. But what about those that aren't so visible? Are there other roles that aren't visible? Those that make it so that we have somewhere to worship, somewhere that is presentable to the public, taking care of the building and grounds, maybe those that show up early to get everything set up. We have communion. It's all laid out in front of in the foyer so that we can take part in it. There's a lot of roles that need to be filled, and not all of them are visible. We might be in the camp of the keepers of the stuff. What is our attitude toward our post? Is it less than those that are visible? We've got two fronts here. We can be the fighters who look at the keepers of the stuff and say, that's easy, that's nothing. Or we could be the keepers of the stuff and think, what I'm doing is it's not enough, or I am not holding a meaningful post here. We need to avoid the mistake of doing both of those things, because the battle, at least in the case of David, had two fronts: the fighters and the keepers of the stuff. Point number 2, pride despises the support role. It was pride that caused the fighters to despise those 200 men that stayed behind at the Brook Besor. Looking back looking at verse 22 now, 1 Samuel chapter 30. Then answered all the wicked men and men of Belial, of those that went with David, and said, because they went not with us, we will not give them aught of the spoil that we have recovered, save to every man his wife and his children, that they may lead them away and depart. And so after the victory, you have who he refers to as the wicked men and the men of Belial. And upon returning, you have those 400 that argue that the 200 who stayed behind shouldn't receive a thing of the spoil. Give them their wives and their children back, let them go, but they get none of the spoil. And that word, that term there, Belial, in the Hebrew, it comes from without profit. They are worthlessness. This is used throughout the Old Testament. You'll see this in other places, but it basically means they are worthless. They are without profit. Who's he speaking to? He's speaking to those 400 men, or he's speaking about, rather, those 400 men that went and fought. Human nature tells us that's the last person you would call worthless. But that's who Samuel is referring to them as, or how they're being described in Samuel chapter 30. So the demand sounds fair, doesn't it? We did all the work. We did all the fighting. We should get the spoil. The demand sounds fair, but the actual effect is to rank the post back at the Brook Besor as less than, doesn't it? To say that what the men at the Brook Besor, guarding the stuff, guarding the line of retreat, to say that what they were doing was less valuable than what they did, therefore they should receive all of the spoil from that victory. But that impulse, you'll notice, doesn't come before victory, but after. They had pride in that they had won. They had defeated the Amalekites. It didn't come before, and they thus looked at this as their victory. Remember, I asked that question at the beginning, who gets the credit? Was it the 400 men? Was it the 200 men? Was it the 600 men, all of them together? Well, let's go forward. Verses 23 through 25. Then said David, ye shall not do so, my brethren, with that which the Lord has given us, who hath preserved us and delivered the company that came against us into our hand. For who will hearken unto you in this matter? But as his part is that goeth down to battle, so shall his part be that tarrieth by the stuff. They shall part alike. And it was so from that day forward. He made it a statute and an ordinance for Israel unto this day. David doesn't credit that victory with the 400, does he? Does he credit it with the 200? No. Does he credit it to the 600 men? He doesn't do that either. He says, look at it again, that which the Lord hath given us in verse 23. So God ordains equal honor at every post because guess what? It wasn't any of their doing that they had won. It was not their doing alone that they had won that victory against the Amalekites. We have men, again, who are visible. They're in the pulpit. We see them conducting Bible studies and everything. Men that are, I shouldn't say just men, roles within the church that are very visible. And we see them. It's so easy to appreciate those roles. And then we have other roles that are less visible and we don't appreciate them as much as we should. But they're all required for the work of the church. And every Christian has a post to fill. So David here, what's his response? That which the Lord has given us. Victory didn't belong to the 400. It belonged to God because it was God that gave that victory. And because it was God's victory to give, who decides where the spoil goes? Who decides who gets the reward? Well, God, it is God who gave the victory. You know, another word study here would be that word we see there, part. In the Hebrew, it's a portion, share, or allotment. And we notice here in the passage we just read that the word part is used for both groups. So God values both posts. I want to move on to the fact that no role goes rewarded. God does not change. And in the new covenant, the same principles we see in the Old Testament apply. Let's turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 3. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, and we'll be beginning there in verse 6. And Paul there says, I have planted and Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So then neither is he that planteth anything, neither he that watereth, but God that giveth the increase. Now he that planteth and he that watereth are one, and every man shall receive his own reward according to his own labor. So no role in the advance of the gospel goes unrewarded. Is that what you read there? No role in the advance of the gospel goes unrewarded. No role is worthless. Some who plant, as Paul says, some who water. There are some that fought in David's case, some who guarded the stuff. Every one of them is remembered by name and record. And every one of them is treasured by God who gives the increase, God who gives the victory. There's no such thing as a Christian without a post. Would you agree with that? We all have a post to fill. There's no such thing as a Christian without a post. There are such things as those who have not recognized their post. We need to be faithful in filling our post. Final point here is the ruling here defends those who are physically incapable of crossing the Brook Besor. Do you notice that? Let's look at that verses 9 through 10 again of what we read. So David went, he and the 600 men that were with him, and came to the Brook Besor, and where those that were left behind stayed. But David pursued, he and 400 men, for 200 abode behind, which were so faint that they could not go over the Brook Besor. Everything said so far rests on that, by the way. They were incapable of fulfilling the role of fighter, of continuing forward with that advance. Now we have another similar case where some stood behind in battle. Let's turn to Judges chapter 5. And in this case, they are battling against Sisera. And Deborah is the judge at this point. This is in the period of the judges. And they experience a victory against Sisera. And then we have the Song of Deborah, where she mentions the tribe of Reuben. Now, the tribe of Reuben did not continue in battle with their brethren against Sisera and his forces. And notice what she calls out here in verse 16 of Judges 5. Why abodest thou among the sheepfolds to hear the bleatings of the flocks? For the divisions of Reuben were their great searchings of heart. And so here, it's a similar instance where some stay back and do not continue and fight with their brethren, but the reason is different. The reason was a lack of loyalty on Reuben's part, and the reason might have been comfort. You know, it's not comfortable. Would you agree it would be more comfortable to stay by the Brook Besor and guard the stuff than it would be to continue forward and fight hand-to-hand combat. Doesn't sound comfortable to me. It doesn't sound like something I would engage in willingly. So it brings you out of your comfort zone. The same is true with evangelism, isn't it? We have to get out of our comfort zone in order to evangelize others. Does that excuse us from evangelizing? No, it doesn't. We might find comfort in saying, I just can't do that. I can't do evangelism. This is something I have to look at myself, because I am not a very socially inclined person. And maybe you're the same. And we have our Bible studies mentioned here on the, what are we calling that board? The numbers board. That's our metrics that we're hitting. How many Bible studies we're seeing? We've seen 42 Bible studies this year. And to my shame, I don't have one. My number's not on there. I can make an excuse about that. I can say, I'm just not a socially adept person. I turn people off socially. I could say that. I could say, I can't do it. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to regulate my role to staying at the Brook Besor. It'd be a mistake for me to do that. So just got personal, so it got awkward there. but I'm working on that. And maybe you're in the same boat. Maybe you don't have a number up here. And that's okay. You might be trying. Then you have those that are incapable of doing so. And I don't mean to regulate this just to Bible studies, because with this new school of this curriculum we're doing with the School of Evangelism, there are a lot of roles that we are all fulfilling. And some of them are visible, and some of them are not so visible. The card writing in the back, I don't know who's writing who, because I'm not a part of that team. That's not a visible role. That's not a visible post, is it? Is it important? Yeah. Are we seeing results from it? I think we are. We have those that are putting together visitor bags, those that are putting together new mover baskets. And I don't know who those people are, who of you are, and I appreciate you. I don't know who you are, but I appreciate that you're doing it. We have roles that are visible, roles that are not so visible, and we have roles that are maybe a little bit more comfortable and roles that are not comfortable. We all need to be trying to do the role that's not comfortable, bringing others to Christ, bringing people here, having Bible studies with people. And it would be a mistake to be reluctant to move ourselves to the front lines and work towards bringing others to Christ. There's some that can't do that. Some that are physically unable to do that. They have their roles too, don't they? They can write cards. I think we had in our New Year planning last year, it was brought up, we had door knocking. There's usually the same core group that does the door knocking. We see them every time there's a door knocking. And we know who each other are. It was brought up that not everybody can door knock, and that's true. Physically, not everybody can do that. But can they do something? It was brought up, we could provide breakfast for those that are door knocking. That was a very nice suggestion. There are other things that can be done to organize the door knocking. My point is this, that we need to make sure if we are staying by the Brook Besor, that it's because we cannot go forth to battle. We need to be pushing ourselves, challenging ourselves to move in the role that's not so comfortable, right? So David Missing some slides that might help you. Is it providence that you are stuck at the Brook Besor, or is it an excuse? Did providence place you there, or did comfort place you there? Only you can answer that for yourself. So here in 1 Samuel 30, it does not flatten every role into the same role. The 400 still fought, and Scripture still says so plainly. They went out. They put their lives on the line more so than those 200 did. But it flattens the ranking of worth, the value of those posts. The Lord who gave victory decides what every post is worth, and He's already put a value on your post. And it's that word, alike. We're all important. We all have a role to fill, and we need to find that role. So somewhere in Ziklag, there might have been 200 exhausted men standing by a pile of baggage, half expecting to be told that they didn't matter. What they did not count. And instead, they heard a statement read over them by the King David himself that would become a law, a principle that would outlive everybody at that camp, that all are to part alike. And so whatever your post is in the work of this congregation, if you're the ones who go, if you're the ones that prepare things, help provide things for those who do go, if you're the School of Evangelism breaks it down into bringers, teachers, and keepers. And we tend to see the teachers, and so we tend to value those who teach. But what would the teachers do if they didn't have someone to teach, someone to bring, to be brought to them to teach? And then let's say we have conversion. We say we have someone who is converted to Christ, who comes to the conclusion that they need to be baptized into the Lord's church. How do we keep them? We got to have people that are good at that too, to encourage and keep people within the fold of God's kingdom. So we all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. And with those strengths, however, we have responsibilities, don't we? If you have never obeyed the gospel this morning, yet you've heard it, you believe it, and you're ready to repent, change the direction in which you're going, to confess Christ and to be baptized into His body this morning, that is a post that nobody can fill for you. There's lots of posts that if you don't do it, somebody else can. The one post that no one can do for you is to take up arms as a Christian. So maybe you're here this morning and you have not done that. The invitation is open. And if you're a Christian who perhaps you've drifted from your post this morning, I want to encourage you to return to your post. If you have any need this morning, the invitation's open as we stand and as we sing.